Hello and welcome. This is Sadusman. In today's video, I'm going to share with you information on calculated columns and measures. So, what is a calculated column? Actually, in a Power BI desktop file, you can write DAX formulas in two places. One are the calculated columns, and the others are the measures. So there are two places. So we'll start with calculated columns. Calculated column is an additional column in the dataset which doesn't exist at the moment. For example, in this existing dataset that I have this data in which I have sales of different products by customer type and salesperson, and I have a sales quantity, unit price, and unit cost. What I don't have in this data is as a column for sales values. I don't know, for example, that on April 20th, 2018, what is the total sales value of the sales made to the customer to this of this product lightsabers, and what I want to know is the sales value of each of these rows, and I can have this information by adding a calculate column in the data. Calculate columns can be added directly in the table view, or it can also be added in the report view. Calculate columns can in fact add different dimensions to the existing data, or it can also add numeric values. Let's do a calculate column here and add a numeric value of sales value in this field in this table. Let's for this we can click on this new column button here in the ribbon. By default, the calculate column will have this column name as a column, and if you don't give it a name, it will have successive names as column 2, column 3. But right now we want to give this more intuitive name such as sales value, and sales value is just a multiplication, a product of two fields which are sales quantity and unit price. So I'm going to type in sales quantity and multiply that with the unit price, and as simple as that, I will have this new column worked out in the table. I will have this comma separator here, and 0 decimal places is fine. So you can see that I have this additional column in my table by the name of sales value. I can now use the sales column in my report. For example, if I just click on sales value, I will have this bar here, and if I bring this year, for example, in the axis, I will get the sales value for each of the years from 2016 till 2019. So this is the sales value through the addition of a calculated column. We can also add different dimensions to our data using calculate columns. For example, in the dates table, I have, if I go to the data view, I have this date column, month name, month number, and year. What I don't have is the quarter. So what I want to do is I want to add a quarter column in this table. For that, I am going to add a new column here. I would like to call my field as quarter, and I will calculate using the formula quarter, and I will refer the dates field in this table, and I want to just concatenate this quarter number with a text QTR space ampersand, and that's perfect. When I press enter, I will get the quarter numbers against each of these lines, right? Quarter 1, quarter 2, and so on. I will have this. Now this is a dimension in the table, and we can use this dimension in a report. For example, if I want to have let's say sales quantity, and I want to have this by analyzed by quarter, so I can put it in axis. So you can see that for each of the values, so we have this information in our table in the report by addition of calculate column, both as a dimension and as a numeric value. Now if you go to measures, what measures can do, if you want to duplicate this page here, delete this as well. So let's talk about measures. For most cases, you may want to avoid adding a calculate column, and you can still fulfill your requirement through the addition of measures. However, in some specific cases, a calculate column may be necessary. For example, the addition of quarters that we just did. it's necessary. We cannot do that through measures. We need to have a calculate column for each of the values. The quarter numbers are necessary. However, for most numeric calculations, we can avoid calculate columns and instead use measures. Measures perform the underlying calculations only when they are used in the visuals. Otherwise, they just remain dormant in the data model. They do not consume any memory. So let's try and calculate a measure of sales value, like we just did over here, and it was just a multiplication of sales quantity and unit price. So instead of adding a column, what I want to do is I want to create a new measure, and for that I will go to the modeling tab and click on new measure. New measure is another place where we can use text formulas. I want to call this let's say sales amount, and by default all measures are named as measure unless you give it a more intuitive name. Sales amount, and I can use a formula called sum x. Sum x will multiply the quantities with the unit price and then sum, add them together. First of all, I need to give the table name. That my table name is data, and the expression that I want to do is basically a multiplication of sales quantity with the unit price. And when I hit enter, I will get another field by the name of sales amount here in the data. What I want to do is I want to add a table, and I want to add, let's say, year, and in the year I don't want to summarize it, don't summarize, and I want to put in sales amount here. So we do column comma separators here, and then if I just go in the focus mode, you can see that we have the sales amount for each of these years, which is being calculated correctly. I can compare this with the sales value calculated column that we have just already calculated here. If I put this in the data and then compare in the focus mode, you can see that the result is the same. The sales amount and the sales value both give me the same result. But the key difference between these two are that the sales value is a calculated column. It gets calculated every time we do anything in the data model, and it consumes a lot of memory. So assume that you have a large number of columns, a large data set, then it will slow down the performance of your system because it recalculates the sales values again and again. Whereas in case of this sales amount, which is a measure, it's only calculated when we put this measure when we drag this thing from the fields list to the canvas in any of the visuals. Otherwise, it just remains dormant here, and it does not consume any memory. There is something called an implicit measure also. You can see that in the data in the field list, the sales quantity is a column, it's a field in the data, and then there's a summation sign next to it, and the summation sign is basically added by the Power BI itself. What it shows is that in the data field, data table, you can see that the sales quantities are here, and these are numeric values. So Power BI just by default use an aggregator, which is sum, and if I want to take this sales quantity here on the canvas, what Power BI does is, for example, if I want to make it a table, what it will do is it will just give me a sum of the sales value, sales quantities. Just imagine that if not for the sum, all the sales values, all the sales quantities from the table would have come in a list. It would not have made any sense. So intelligently, Power BI Desktop just puts a summation aggregator to this. We can change the summation aggregator. For example, if I put this and click here, instead of sum, for example, I can use an average. Average will change. And now if you go in focus mode, you can see, if you go in the focus mode, you can see the average of the sales quantities here. So these are implicit measures which Power BI Desktop automatically adds to the fields with the numeric values here. But the measure that we just calculated over here, these are called explicit measures or model measures. We can do complex calculation in these measures, which are necessary for to serve our purpose. So the bottom line is, whenever you have to make a choice between a calculated column and a measure, always go for a measure because of performance issues. Instead, calculate columns will should only be used when you have to have a dimension. You can want to calculate something which can be added as a filter on the report that you are going to make. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.